If I went back and read a book I rated 5 stars 4 years ago, would I still rate it 5 stars today? Hi friends and readers, another week, another reading vlog. It's coming out of my mouth every week, and that's because I'm back to my regularly scheduled cadence of reading every day, every week, and bring you along the way. Now, about 2 weeks ago, I went on vacation, came back, and was just doom scrolling. I couldn't kick just picking up my phone, and because of that, I decided to do a reading challenge, which you may have seen last week, where I tried reading 100 pages a day, every day, for a week. Some combination of the vacation, the doom scrolling, and that type of challenge, I nearly put myself into a book slump / I think I definitely put myself into a book slump that week, and towards the end of that week started to come out of it by reading a book by none other than Christina Lauren. And here on my shelf, that book was called The Romance Revival. Now, I can't be 100% positive that I'm out of that book slump, but it was a scary thought, and I like reading and I don't want to be in a slump. So what we're gonna do this week is pick up books that we rated 5 stars, and the hope is that these books are still 5 stars for me and they will make sure I don't put myself into any sort of reading slump, because we don't want that. However, I am being mindful that some of these books I read 4 years ago. Another of these books I might have read 2 to 3 years ago. We're gonna try to read 2 books this week. And knowing myself, my reading preferences might have changed since then, and in fact, I know that they have. However, these may still be a comfort for me, or maybe they're not anymore. I am gonna toy the line of, if you rate something once on the first read, should you change your rating the second time you read it? Let me know your thoughts on rereading and re-rating, and I'm gonna try to form some of my own thoughts on that this week. The first book I'm gonna be picking up for the reading vlog is a book that I read in 2022. It is now 2026, so it has been 4 years since I read that book, and that book is Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. Let's go. We have made it to Tuesday and I'm currently on my lunch break from work. I also just got my new bookshelf / storage unit set up thanks to my boyfriend's help and my own help as well. We just put the cabinet doors down here for the rest of the second half of the shelves. We needed some more storage and these are perfect. I'm obsessed. I really like how they turned out and I'm so glad. Now, on a bookish note, we are rereading 5-star reads. And I let you know that the first 5-star read we're gonna be rereading is called Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. Now, before I start gabbing, because I have a lot to say, it's working so far in that I wanted to go back to some comfort reads, or what I thought might be comfort reads of old 5 stars, so I could avoid / get out of a reading slump from last week. And it's been a day and we're at page 197 of this book. That is by far more pages in the last 24 hours than I could manage at all last week. So I'm feeling really good about doing this and getting away from that slump. So literally almost halfway through this book, I think there were just over 400 pages. And I have got all these notes on my phone about this book and what I want to talk about so I don't forget. First, let's talk about Christina Lauren. This is actually 2 authors. I said it in my last video from last week because I also read one of their books last week. Christina Lauren is not one author, it's 2 authors writing under a pen name. I believe Christina is the first name of one of them and Lauren is the first name of the other. Common mistake, I didn't know that for probably up until the second or third book I read by these authors. Speaking of which, we have now read 4 books by this author. The one we're rereading this week. Then we read The Unhoneymooners by them. Gave this a 3.5 star a few years ago, probably 3 years ago. And then last week I read The Romance Revival. I believe I gave this a 3.5, 3.75 stars. Come into this one open-minded and I think you'll enjoy it for a summer read. And I've also read The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I just read it on my Kindle at the time, so I don't have a physical copy of it. That's 4 out of many books. If you go and look at their backlog, they have written so many books. I haven't even touched the surface. But let's jump into this reread of Love and Other Words. I read this back in 2022. It is now 2026. So it has been 4 years. And to put you in the mindset of Victoria 4 years ago, I was 21 in college. I remember where I was reading this in my college apartment with my friends. And I remember it being the first book at least I recall it being the first book that ever made me cry. And it was really, really early into my journey of rediscovering reading while still in college, but coming out of college almost, and reading for fun and reading for hobbies and finding what I like to read instead of reading for textbooks and for assignments and for school. And I do believe back in the time I read it on my Kindle. And then since then, I had someone gift it to me a few years ago as well while I was in college, and I was able to put it on my physical shelf. So it's been nice this week to read the physical copy. So will this book remain a 5-star? I think that really just depends on my reading preferences over the last 4 years, and my cats are playing around, and another take I've been seeing on the internet. For me, my reading preference is fiction and romance, and this is considered adult romance. So it does still fall under my genres that I enjoyed to pick up. It is also childhood best friends to lovers or second chance romance, a little bit of both probably. Again, tropes that I still enjoy. Really, while I'm rereading it now, I'm sort of battling what I think I remember about the book from 4 years ago. And there is a big plot point in this book that I do know and remember what happens. I just don't remember how it happens. I just know it's coming. And so I'm still trying to recall everything that leads up to that moment. And lastly, the thing I wanted to talk about is that I've seen this book pop up in conversation and dialogue on the internet, book talk, YouTube, in regards to maybe some trigger warnings or hot takes on the internet. And I remember seeing these videos and hearing these conversations and not really partaking in them because I hadn't read the book in so long that I couldn't remember anything as it pertained to what these people were saying. If you're on the internet and you are knowing anything about this vagueness I'm giving you about this internet hot take or controversy regarding this book, let me know your thoughts. So far, I don't think I've reached anything in the book halfway through that leads me to confirm or deny. It came out in 2018, so I read it 4 years after it came out, and now it's been 4 years since then, 8 years since this book came out. I think that's always helpful context. We are also following a now and then timeline, and the now and then timeline is between two characters that we know in this book as Macy and Elliot. The then timeline is Macy and Elliot being best friends. Macy's dad bought a house next to Elliot's family's house, and they would visit on the weekends during the summer, spring breaks as Macy was a little kid. And Macy was going through something really hard in her family, and she really leaned on Elliot, and they became best friends, best buddies. They grew up alongside one another at this vacation home really for her, but he lived there permanently. So that's the then timeline, the childhood best friends. The now timeline is that it has been 10, 11, 12 years, something like that, since Elliot and Macy have spoken. We don't know why Macy stopped talking to Elliot. We just know something happened. Flash forward 10, 11 years, and suddenly Macy has run into Elliot again. Except for Macy is now a pediatric nurse, is what I believe I remember, working in a hospital and engaged to another man. So Macy is planning a wedding to her fiance and then runs into her childhood best friend slash first love. You can imagine how tricky that's going to be. And with that, I think that there are tropes and trigger warnings that pop up in the story that some people might not like to read. The then timeline is working up to the moment that Macy and Elliot stop talking, and then in the now timeline, they are meeting each other again, this time as grown adults who've spent their lives separate. So I'm gonna keep reading and see if I can piece together the details that I've forgotten about how this book ends, and I'll update you once I finish rereading this, which is crazy because we're already halfway through in just a day. Let's pull up the notes. It's Wednesday, yet again, on my lunch break, 12:04 to be exact. And last night, Tuesday, I finished our first reread of the week, which was none other than Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. I absolutely ran through this reread. So we'll start off by saying I do think rereading books that you previously enjoyed, rated 5 stars, is helpful if you think you're in a book slump, approaching a book slump, trying to get out of the depths of a book slump. Go ahead and reread your favorite book or even a book you read previously because it's It's such a different experience rereading a book than when you read it the first time. I, first off, am trying to see if I'm going to remember things the same. And I think that you lose a lot of at least 4 years in between these rereads, or the first read and the reread. I lost a lot of the small details or just general details about these characters, Macy and Elliot, and their past as childhood best friends and now their future as adults. I knew that there was this big plot point coming about the reason why they didn't speak to each other for so long. I remember the twist to that plot point, but I didn't remember exactly the details leading up to it. However, I'm reading this book and I'm starting to actually recall the places that I imagined up in my head, which was just so fun. I think that's what makes reading just a cool thing to do, because every single person that picks up a book is going to imagine a place, a setting, people in their head, and it's going to look probably totally different than what someone else is imagining, but it's the same story and the same words on paper. And it's been 4 years since I imagined up this world. I'm also a different person since then, and I still had some of the same places and images in my head that I remember from 4 years ago, which is just crazy to me. Reading is so fun. Go pick up a book. So without spoiling what happens to these two characters, that moment that we just work up to, which by the way, you don't figure it out until the last few pages of the book, definitely within the last 100 pages of the book. You're just building and building and building. And if you do not like miscommunication, you are not going to like Love in Other Words. They find themselves meeting up again after so long of not talking to each other, and then they start to rekindle friendship even though she's engaged. They don't talk about what separated them until the very end of the book. They don't communicate about that specific event in their lives. Now, what I'll say is Macy definitely miscommunicates along the way, even in the adulthood situation and finding themselves as friends again. Elliot, he does sort of communicate his feelings and how he's felt since the 11 years have happened and where he wants to go from here from the beginning, but still they don't communicate about the big past timeline and what happened until the book's over. So that's gonna bother you if you don't like miscommunication, or not even miscommunication, not communicating at all. And for the romance category, this is not your happy-go-lucky fun summer romance. No. If anything, pick this book up in the winter time and be sad and emotional about it, because this book is heavy and what both of these characters went through, triggering. There's grief, there's topics of consent, underage drinking. There are certainly warnings to be had about this book and what happens to Macy and Elliot in their childhood as teenagers. Now, coming into this, I said I saw a video on the internet that made me think twice about this book being 5 stars, because I'll be honest, it was a TikTok that painted this book very negatively and like the authors did not take care or take sensitivity to certain triggers and warnings in the book. And I will say that video opened my eyes to go into this book thinking, okay, maybe I missed something 4 years ago when I read it, and I do see that there are some sensitivities in here, and there are things that happen to these characters that happen to real people in real life that you need to be careful with, and they're not easy to read. And I'll leave it at that. If you want to explore further, stay off the internet. Read for yourself and come to conclusions on your own. And I also said that when I first read the book, I do believe or recall that it was a book that made me cry for the very first time, or at least a romance book in my new age of reading. I did not cry this time around. I did get close to it because it's a very sad ending in some ways. I think again, you prepare yourself to know, or at least I did, that that was going to happen. So I had a chance of being a little bit more emotionally sound. You, however, if you've never picked up this book, good luck. With all that being said, I don't know if I would rate this book a 5-star as current day Victoria. However, I have decided in my rereading endeavors, I'm not going to tell you what I would rate this if I re-rated it today, because that's the fun of having your own channel and making your own videos. I want to leave that 5-star rating to Victoria 4 years ago, and it'll be a mystery to what I think now. I will say I do think this is still my favorite Christina Lauren book of the 4 now that I have read. If you know a Christina Lauren book that I have not read, I read the 4 I mentioned earlier: Love in Other Words, The Paradise Problem, Unhoneymooners, and now The Romance Revival. Please let me know. I'd love to keep going through this author's or these authors' backlog. Next up, we're gonna go grab our next 5-star reread off of my shelf, because I do in fact own it, and that is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. It is actually the most cozy time ever. I don't think you'd believe me if I told you it was 12:20 on a Thursday and I'm on my lunch break. It is just pouring down rain. It has been raining all day today and I just wanted to be off of work this entire morning to sit down and read my book. Going back to work after this lunch break is going to be so difficult. I love the rain. I welcome the rain, except for the rain needs to clear up on Saturday because we have a Noah Khan concert to go to. Fingers crossed. Now, I'm going against everything Victoria told you in the last clip about rating Love and Other Words a 5-star and not telling you if I would rate it that again on a reread. After picking up our next read, The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, I have decided that it's likely that other book was not a 5-star still for me based off the feelings and the giddiness and the excitement I have strongly felt about this book halfway through it already. Yes, I plowed through that book and I still really enjoyed it. It's still a very high rating for me, but I can safely say that this is going to definitely most certainly still be a 5-star for me. So let's talk about it. Before we do dive into this one though, I was having a hard time, there's a hair on my mouth, choosing between which books to read for the second half of the week, and I went with that book, but I almost read Better Than the Movies again. This was a 5-star read for me back in 2023, so 3 years ago now. I do know that my preferences for YA are not high, so I wanted to leave this book in 2023 with all the feelings I had. Maybe one day I'll return to it, but right now I'm just really not vibing with the YA genres or books that are YA recently. They're not bad to me, it's just not a preference. So we'll put this off. Let me know if I should reread it though. I think it would still stand up to the 5-star feeling, but I don't know. Now back to this book. This is by Ashley Poston. I'm gonna go with Poston instead of Poston because my last name is Post and they're mostly spelled the same. Poston it is. What you may know about this author is that they are the queen of magical realism. From the catalog or backlog of books that I know by this author, all of them have some sort of magical element in them. Now, the books that I've read by them are obviously The 7-Year Slip, and then one other book. It's the one that is about a fictional world where the girl basically falls into her favorite book. I'm losing track of what the title is. It's a blue cover. Maybe it says love in it. I don't know. Editing Victoria is gonna throw up a picture of what that book's called here. I think I gave it like a 3.5 star. Had a good time, and I thought if you are a reader or someone who likes bookish content, you would definitely like that book. So I've actually only read 2 books by this author. I do know that they have another one out that's based off like a songwriter, singer or something like that. Again, I'll put it right here. And then more recently, a brand new release that has something to do with the magical garden, I believe. I really should have researched this more. All that to say, I've only read 2 books by this author, and I know there are at least 2 more by them, maybe even more that I'm not even aware of. If you've read a book by the author and you have a favorite, please let me know. As we stand, 7-Year Slip is definitely my favorite. I read this book back in February 2024. It is end of July 2026, so it has been about a year and a half. No, 2.5 years. Nearly 2.5 years. And for this reread, honestly, I have no thoughts except for I knew I just wanted a comforting, whimsical reread. I don't have any doubts that this book will stand up to the tale of my preferences. Now, I will say I do not gravitate towards books with magical realism in them. It's just not something I can usually let go of. And by that, I mean I'm such an analytical, logistical person. And so when things can't be explained or I can't explain them in my head, sometimes I have to think more or concentrate more to not think or concentrate on those pieces of the book. And because of that, I might not always enjoy my experience reading about magical realism. However, I have put all that aside and I'm just going into this with some whimsy and coming into it knowing that I don't need an explanation. I can just enjoy myself. That's the vibes I needed. This book is just about 326 pages, which is chef's kiss on the length. Our main character's name is Clementine and her nickname is Lemon. So sweet. And then our other main character's name is Ewan. I actually went on to Ashley Poston's one of their interviews to see how they pronounce the character because apparently that's different than how it's pronounced in like an audiobook, but his name in my head is being pronounced Ewan. And how do Lemon and Ewan find themselves in the same world together? Well, I'll tell you, and that's because of the 7 7-year slip. Our main character Lemon is actually going through a really hard time, and that's because she lost her best friend, who was also her aunt. They had a really close relationship, and part of that relationship centered around this apartment, which, by the way, a beautiful setting. I remember as soon as I got into the first chapter of this book, what I had pictured as what this apartment looked like, where it was in New York City, and all the setting and atmosphere. I was transported right back, which is incredible. This apartment where her aunt lived, and thus Lemon would visit and stay and hang out and do all the fun things as you do with someone you enjoy spending time with. Well, now that her aunt has passed away, you can imagine that it's really hard to be in this apartment. Lemon is having a very hard time and has just been laying low for the last few months since the death of her aunt. Until one day she decides to finally go back to this apartment, get things together, and she walks in and there stands Ewan, a man she's never met before, and suddenly the apartment doesn't look like what it looked like not that long ago. And you're like, what? The 7-year slip. Ewan is actually there 7 years in the past, but it's current day for our character Lemon. So there comes the magical realism part. This apartment can take people back into the past, but really it's the past for Ewan. It's 7 years ago for him, but it's current day for her, and she's still seeing him in her current day, but he's 7 years younger. So does he exist in current day time? Do they know each other? Does he know that he was a part of a magical apartment? These are all the kind of questions that are probably going through your head as you read this book for the first time, and I hope that you'll find out. Let's keep reading. I'm well over halfway, all in under a day. I'm on chapter 23, page 178. I'm probably gonna finish this book in the next day because it's raining, it's cozy, and that's all I want to do for the rest of my day. I'll work 4 more hours, but then after that, we're gonna read. In another world, this Victoria did not reread this book and instead picked up a different 5-star read, and I am so glad this Victoria picked this up. The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. It's been, what, 2.5 years since I read this, and I don't know why I didn't think about rereading this sooner. 5-star, 6-star read. Love, in other words, I already forgot about you. This book right here is so good. It's so good. I didn't have a single complaint. I love this book. It's the perfect book in my opinion. I don't remember feeling this excited about it 2.5 years ago when I read it, but I definitely was because I gave it a 5 stars. Oh gosh, I'm not gonna recover. I need to reread this every year now. And also the reread, maybe that's what makes it so much more exciting. You just pick up on things that I thought I didn't even remember about this book. And then they would write some small detail about fajitas, you'll find out, and I was like, wait, I remember about the fajitas. I'm so excited. I am remembering details that I thought I didn't even know. Just one key word and I'm back in business. And just the small details in this book. Oh my goodness. The slow burn, the tension, the thought of you finding this person in your current day, but for them, it was 7 years ago. And potentially for 7 years, they either knew about this magic in your world or they didn't, and they've been pining after you for that long. Are you kidding? Also, like the pigeons, that was a small detail I really love. Mother and effer. I didn't highlight, but I dog-eared so many pages while reading this time because I just felt drawn to big dog ear here, but there were just so many quotes and so many themes that this book touched on that really just pulls on your heartstrings. And you open up the book with the idea that this apartment is magical, but as a little kid, Lemon always thought her aunt was just the magic. She thought that the magic lived in her aunt. She didn't really understand that, okay, no, actually you go 7 years in the past and someone else is 7 years in the future. Little Lemon didn't understand. Now we know by reading this book and the summary of this book that that magic really did exist, but also that home is not always a place. The magic can live with someone, and as they move, that magic moves with them. The love exists with them, and that love moves with them. And that sometimes you find a person that makes you feel like you belong, no matter where you are. Oh my goodness. I started crying here at the end because of these quotes. It touches on a lot of grief and the heaviness of grief, but also something beautiful that when you lose a loved one, what's left behind and how you can carry on. Ugh, they said, and I carried that pain and that love and that terrible, terrible day with me. I got comfortable with it. I walked with it. Sometimes the people you loved left you halfway through the story. Sometimes they left you without a goodbye. Stop. I'm almost about to cry right now again. And it goes on to talk about the love that she has for her aunt that's no longer alive. LOL, sad again. It's a 5-star read. Please go pick it up. If you enjoyed anything I've said about this book in the last however many minutes, obsessed. I'm so glad I reread this. I'm so glad I reread my 5-star reads this week. I will definitely be doing this again as I read more and as I add more 5 stars to my catalog. I'm so glad also this book is on my shelf. We finally got the shelves together and they're looking in a way that I want. I've had such a good week after nearly book slumping last week. Hopefully we can continue these good vibes into the next reading vlog. I'll maybe see you then. That's all. Bye for now.